Excellent. Well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Vale White Horses Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson and I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. I have 5 quick housekeeping announcements. So firstly, for those joining remotely, when you're not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. If you share a presentation on the screen, please stop sharing as soon as it's no longer needed. Public speakers must only have the cameras on and be unmuted when addressing the committee or answering questions of clarification in their designated slots. Evacuation procedure for those of us here. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to your right of the meeting room, and stand at 70.9. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform Democratic Services officer if you have not done so. Mobile phones, please off or silent. Fourthly, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the application they're interested in to be debated, you're very welcome to do so. You can leave by the main entrance from which you came in, but please do so quietly. And when the meeting has ended, I'll ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And so the final point for me, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public, both those attending here in person and those attending remotely, ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberation outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. So that's it for my chair's announcements. Just for those two who are joining remotely, who we can now see on our screens, you're very welcome. Could I please just remind you to only have your cameras on and be unmuted when you're speaking in your designated slot. Thank you. So with that, I turn to agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence. Emily Barry, do we have any apologies this evening?
We do, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Ron Batstone, who is substituted by Councillor Paul Barrow this evening, from Councillor Jenny Hannaby, who is substituted by Councillor Hayley Gascoigne this evening. And we've also had apologies from Councillor Jill Rayner and Cheryl.
Thank you very much. And would you mind taking a quick roll call so everyone knows who's
Councillor Paul Barrow?
Here.
Councillor Hayley Gascoigne. Here. Councillor Scott Horton.
Here.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Here.
Councillor Mike Pickles.
Here.
Councillor Val Shaw. Here. And Councillor Max Thompson.
here. Thank you very much. Great. I turn to the agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of September 2024. Assuming you think they're a correct record of the meeting, can I have a motion to approve those? Councillor Madison, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Horton. All those in favour of adopting those? Those against? Any abstentions? Of course, you guys weren't here, so excellent. Thank you very much. So I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Fifthly, urgent business. I turn to Adrian Duffield. Do we have any urgent business?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And now finally, public participation. We have a number of speakers on both of the applications we're considering this evening. We also received a number of statements on the first application we're considering, which is Woodland Farm. I confirm that these were circulated to members of the committee prior to the meeting, and we may make reference to them in our debate or in our questioning. And with that,
Can we just check if there's any declarations of interest?
of course, apologies, I managed to miss that one.
No,
No,
that's right.
absolutely. So agenda item 4, which I missed, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? I can't see any, so thank you. So no declaration of interest, and apologies for missing that item. So we're going to move on to item 7 in a second. Just before we move on to that, and Catherine Canavan, you're presenting that one, I can still see someone on the screen. Mr. Tim Clark, I think I can see you. So if you could turn your camera off, that would be kind before we continue. Okay. Yes, I guess we'll just let me confirmation Democratic, because I think if the camera's on, that will be affecting the live stream.
It does affect the live stream, yes. That's not something I can control from here.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess we will. I guess we will proceed. I'm just trying to work out if there's a way.
You should be able to do it remotely.
Yeah, I'll just see if there's a way of doing it. It's been done remotely. Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. So with that, we're going to move on to agenda item 7, which is Woodland Farm, Appleton Road, and Catherine Canavan. I believe you're presenting on this one.
I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Please do.
The first application to be considered is the proposal at Woodland Farm, Longworth, to convert 6 barns to 5 dwellings. Just want to pick up on one point in the reports. and 6.2, which mentions the local plan is set to regulate Reg 18. This is now Reg 19 and applies to both items actually. That being said, the same weight still applies to the policies, so there's no change in that respect. The site already has permission for a very similar proposal under a Class Q prior approval scheme, which is required to be built out by July 2025. The current application, in addition to the conversion proposal, includes a bike and secure store for each dwelling, carports and parking, as well as orchard areas to provide biodiversity enhancements. For conversion proposals, officers must be satisfied that the structure is capable of conversion. Works can, however, be carried out to the roof and walls, and additional doors and windows can be inserted as long as the character is not adversely affected. This is consistent with the prior approval process. A structural survey was carried out as part of the prior approval process, and an addendum was provided with the current application, which confirmed no significant structural changes had occurred. The prior approval is valid until July 2025, and 9 months is considered sufficient to implement the previously approved scheme for 5 dwellings. The principle of conversion is therefore acceptable. The current proposal relating to the barns themselves is unchanged, and the prior approval is therefore a valid fallback position. The site visit took place with members on Monday. Since the visit, the applicant has confirmed that the waste collection for the site will be through a private collection service, and the waste vehicle would be able to collect for the 5 dwellings as well as Woodland Farm from and enter the site. From a planning perspective, I recommend a further condition requiring details of the waste collection service to be provided prior to occupation, whether private or through the council. It should be noted that the council collection service is a public service and that the prior approval scheme could have used either option. It would therefore be unreasonable to restrict the waste collection solely to a private service. The site is accessed via a 150-metre long track, and 2 passing points are proposed on land within the same ownership, marked in yellow on the plan. An amendment to condition 11 is recommended to specifically refer to implementation of the 2 passing bays. Visibility displays can be demonstrated onto Appleton Road in line with the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. The highways officer has visited the site and been involved with the previous applications. Officers are satisfied that safe access can be provided for 5 households without affecting other road users or neighbouring accesses. 3 areas of orchard planting are proposed as biodiversity offsetting for the scheme. This is required to meet policy CP46 of the local plan, rather than as part of the newly introduced biodiversity uplift requirements. A condition requiring a biodiversity enhancement plan and setting out the management and maintenance strategy for a 30-year period has been secured, and the applicant has confirmed that a maintenance company will be set up to manage the orchard planting. This approach is a standard approach for securing biodiversity enhancements on site or on land within the same ownership. Any move to sell the land or use as a garden space would result in a breach of condition, and the planning enforcement team would then investigate further. While the offsetting is a policy requirement, it is noted that this is a betterment over the prior approval scheme, which could still be implemented without any requirements for any biodiversity enhancements. One final point, there is currently a gate with an access keypad which provides access to the site and Woodland Farm. The applicant has advised that this would be removed entirely as part of the application. Subject to approval, this detail could be shown on plans as part of the boundary treatment plan, which has been secured by condition. The conversion of the buildings to 5 dwellings is comparable to the previously approved prior approval scheme, and the introduction of cycle stores, carports and orchard planting are considered a betterment to the previous scheme. Subject to an amendment to condition 11, the officer recommendation is for approval. I pass back to the chair for further consideration of the application.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And we'll return to you some questions once we've heard from our speakers this evening. So we have 4 speakers registered on this application. The first is Councillor Chris Dyer, a representative of Longworth Parish Council. Councillor Dyer. Please feel free to come to the door. You can stand if you wish, but feel free to come to the table. You're very welcome, and you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and you'll get a 30-second warning when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. Longworth Parish Council unanimously objects to this application. I won't dwell on the already valid and highly emotive reasons that will be put forward by my peers to unanimously reject this proposal. The sacks of rubbish and waste piling up, causing a hazard to road users, the overwhelming disinterest in biodiversity and the local ecological balance, the frankly dangerous highways and access proposals. We have data that shows that an average of 1,500 vehicles a day pass this site. At peak times, that's about 1 car every 30 seconds. Instead, I'm going to present facts to you that will leave this committee in no doubt that it should unanimously reject this application and indeed view any associated Class Q consent as obsolete. The local neighbourhood plan has been fully adopted and should be given full weight. This application fails to meet the requirements of the plan on a number of fundamental issues. The plan allows for limited infill development only in built-up areas. This site does not meet the definition of a built-up area, and indeed reflects the definition in the plan of land which will never be capable of development. Even if it could be argued that the site is a built-up area, then the application fails to meet the definition of limited infill, not least due to the design, the number of units, and the appalling access. So the proposal is not in a built-up area and should be rejected. Further, this proposal does not meet the definition of limited infill, so it should be rejected. Yet it gets even worse. Even if this committee were minded to simply ignore these flagrant conflicts with the local neighbourhood plan, this proposal also fails to meet the requirements that it should be an appropriate scale, enhance the surroundings, protect and enhance nature and wildlife habitats. The neighbourhood plan has simply been ignored by the applicants. Rather unhelpfully, the plan statement contains a very thinly veiled threat regarding the suggestion that if this application is not granted, then the build will still go ahead via the fallback Class Q consent, which we believe was seriously misleading and should never have been granted. It should be noted that critically, the applicant has failed in the interim period to obtain a lawful development certificate from the council and has consequently failed to demonstrate that the fallback position is lawful. Therefore, there is no fallback position. For the purposes of determination of this planning application, it should therefore be determined against the adopted development plan without a fallback position. In conclusion, this application has been deliberately and maliciously designed to misinform and obfuscate the truth that the original Class Q consent was seriously misleading, and the resulting subordinate planning application uses this to entirely fail to address critical requirements of the local planning authority and the local neighbourhood plan. This proposal should be unanimously rejected, and the original Class Q consent should be rescinded and considered obsolete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer. I'll just see if there are any questions of clarification for you. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Dyer? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned a section of the Longworth neighbourhood plan regarding the infill. I was wondering if you could just guide me on trying to find it, just if you knew which what the number was to point me towards it. I'm not as familiar with the plan as perhaps you are.
And I wish I were familiar enough to point you in the direction of the specific clause. Right, regarding infill development, 4.10.
Thank you very much.
So 4.81 and 0.3 of the local plan.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of clarification? In which to say thank you very much for your time, Councillor Dyer. And I now turn to our next speaker on this application, which is Yvonne Longstaff. Mrs. Longstaff, are you there? Ms. Longstaff, are you there?
Yes, you're there.
Yes.
Excellent. I can hear you. I can't yet see you, so please feel free to turn your camera on. Excellent. Love it. Well, we can hear you and we can see you, and you have 3 minutes when you're ready, and you'll get a warning when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you for joining us this evening. Your time will start when you start.
I have been asked to speak on behalf of the neighbours who are deeply concerned over this application. You have received evidence refuting the mainly misleading statements in the numerous applications for the site over the last 2.5 years. Your officer recommends approval, yet also says if it were not for the existing queue permission, the site would not be acceptable. The officer investigating the queue application reported in his email, obtained through a Freedom of Information request, that he was concerned over the suitability of the buildings being capable of conversion due to height, structural soundness, and previous business activities precluding it from Class Q, but he was refused time to investigate. Concerns over the validity of that approval were raised by several people within the legal timeframe for challenge, but were ignored by the Vale. Subsequent requests for a review from neighbours, parish council and district councillor have not been answered. Highways issued a written statement that 5 new dwellings, in addition to the existing dwelling, will reduce the total amount of traffic, including larger vehicles using the site, a statement with no evidence and makes no sense. The village has little public transport, so increased vehicle movement must be expected if this site is approved. Appleton Road, although a 20-mile-an-hour area, is now narrow and very busy, with most cars not observing the speed limit. The 1/4-mile section between the 20-mile-an-hour sign and Harris Lane has vehicle exits for 12 properties. Adding a further 5 properties will increase vehicles' movements by over 40%, all entering and exiting from one single lane track less than 4 metres wide. The same officer that asserts this site entrance is sufficient for 6 dwellings recently reported that the parallel driveway 50% wider over 25 metres away, serving fewer dwellings, was deemed to need 2 large passing places, a midway turning area for service and emergency vehicles, and an adopted road. Where is the consistency and precedent in this?
You have 30 seconds.
We believe the Vale made an error in granting the queue evidence by your own officers' reports, and instead of dealing with this, have just tried to ignore it, giving rise to a fallback position being the only reason an application would ever be considered in this location. We worry what message will be sent out and the precedent it will set if approved, and vehemently object to this application. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll just see if there are any questions of clarification for you from anyone on the committee. Do we have any questions of clarification? I can't see any, in which case I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening. And thank you very much. And I now call upon our next speaker, Alex Cresswell. And I believe Alex Cade is joining, but will only be there to answer questions. That's right. Yeah, thank you very much. Perfect. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. As with everyone else, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and you've got a 30-second warning.
Thank you. This is to try and find solutions that go above and beyond what is deemed reasonably necessary in planning terms. We have gone beyond what's necessary and tried to reduce to additional waste on the highway verge. We recognise that, and we want to go away from that and offer a private collection service whereby they can actually come into the site and take the waste away on a fortnightly basis. They operate with a different truck to what council service uses, which is smaller, and can be bespoke for the site, so that there's no issue with learning.
And this is fundamentally a betterment to what has already been approved, where effectively they could be left on the roadside. So this application again is a fundamentally a betterment where we've resolved the issue where they're going to be collected at the end rather than left on the road. And again, we're going to include Woodland Farm, the existing house within that, to reduce another effectively any obstacles being on the roadside. So yeah,
it's also an amenity benefit in that the existing Class Q people would have to take their waste up, whereas with this they no longer have to. Mm-hmm. So for
do they have to pay for that, or
it will be implicit in the purchase of the property, but there's a management company operating, and it will be the same as on most new build estates where there is a service charge.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, that same management company will also be doing the biodiversity net gain. And
it will all come under their control, and they'll probably have a landscape maintenance company to maintain it.
And one final thing, we're on site. We were told, indeed from this, that the council's food waste trucks could go down the lane. It was the big one.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, the waste management scheme you're proposing, would that be council going down for food waste collection and just for recycling and household waste, or would it be for all waste?
All encompassing.
All encompassing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Pickles, do you want to come in?
You asked my question.
I'm sorry.
Ask another one.
The
area set aside for as part of the commitment to the biodiversity offset.
Yeah.
The 3 areas.
Yeah.
What's to stop those areas from being turned into garden and or to other purposes?
They will be a condition as your officer referred to, which will secure that maturity. It's the same as any other planning application which is being put to the council after December and April, where the BNG legislation came in. It'll be subject to the same stipulations and enforcement by the council if there is no adherence to it.
Any further questions? I think that's up. Yes, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. We now have our final speaker on this application, Councillor Mark Coleman. Councillor Coleman, as everyone else, you have 3 minutes and you get a warning at 30 seconds. Thank you for joining us, and when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. My main points was over the waste. So I don't intend to waste your time by reading out the whole thing again. However, I just need to make sure that you understood that the issue I had was the location of the waste at the end of the road, the end of the lane with the access. I understand your solution, and I would like to make sure that that was identified in the planning approval. If the approval is given, we'll just make sure that it's a condition of such like. I also would like to say that the report from the applicant suggests that the carbon waste collection is an optional opt-in, which it is. I just made sure that there is a solution for those residents who choose to opt in, because if the council delivers them with a brown bin, my question would be where that bin would be sited. So it is optional, but we need to support the residents were they to choose to opt in and understand how that was going to be dealt with. My second concern is over the proximity of the vehicles passing adjacent property. Although the access lane was previously used by agricultural vehicles, I'm concerned at the increase in vehicle use and the proximity to the neighbouring house. Officers suggested the lane would be used mainly at the beginning and end of the working day, but this can't be guaranteed. The number of parking spaces on the site suggests there could be very frequent use of the lane with only 2 metres separation from the dwelling. The owner of that house can quite rightly expect to be able to have their windows open without disturbance from vehicles using the lane. And my third point then is finally, I note that there were 2 passing places on the plans. Whilst these would allow vehicles to pass each other when they are already in the lane, they would not help when vehicles meet close to the entry exit point. Either a vehicle would have to reverse to the passing place or back out onto the highway. The latter would be dangerous with no visibility of oncoming traffic, and the former, reversing into the parking space, would require reversing over a considerable distance. So I'm happy that I've heard a solution to the waste, and I thank you for that. That does relieve me of one of my, which was actually my major concern. However, I do still have concerns over the 2 other factors, and I thank you for your time listening to me today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coleman. Does anyone have any questions and clarification? Councillor Gaspar.
So about so are you saying that you would like to see that they could change the plan to allow that access where, because what you're saying is people won't be able to use the passing place at the point of turning in and out, and will have to either reverse or whatever. But I think from looking at the plan, it wouldn't be possible, would it, to
so I'm not suggesting a solution. I'm identifying a problem that were a car to have a vehicle gone past the passing place on its way out of the lane, and another vehicle come round the corner to pull into the lane, one of those 2 vehicles is going to have to reverse.
Yeah.
And the one onto the highway, I think, is probably the worst situation, because you've now got the back of the vehicle behind you pulling out onto a road, which I accept is 20 miles an hour, but it is a relatively busy road. But it's not.
Has it got street lights? You have to forgive me because.
I don't know. I don't think it does.
I think. We can ask them.
Thank you.
Unless you know the answer. So
I do not know that. I think the answer is no, but I wouldn't want to commit
Yes,
to that.
I'm afraid we're not able to bring people who've already spoken back into the discussion. So if you don't know, we'll ask our officer. I don't recall seeing street lights. But yeah, I don't think there were street lights on the site. Cool. Are there any further questions for? Thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm now going to turn to any questions we have of our officers. So has anyone got any questions? Councillor Pickles.
Can I just ask a question about conversion? I mean, so our technical representatives have obviously scrutinised the conversion proposals and their content that these buildings will be capable of being converted and will be structurally sound and have no problems serving as a habitat where they're intended.
Yeah, and that's where, so that's been picked up at prior approval process. It was again raised as concerns by residents on the current proposal, and at that point we said, can we have additional information? And that's provided to show that there's no significant deterioration, that they were still structurally sound and were capable of conversion. And I think it's also worth noting that although the fallback position is valid and is it plays quite a big part in this, if that was taken away, we were looking at it purely as a conversion proposal, it would still meet our conversion policy. So yes, the fallback is relevant, but that's not the only reason we'd be recommending approval.
I'm just trying to look at this application.
Yeah.
Its boxes that we have.
That's Barrett.
I mean, I hear what you say, but I remember an application in Westcott, I think it was a conversion of a barn, and I remember having an issue with one of the officers about this issue of substantial reconstruction. I mean, I could imagine these barns being basically stripped out, and nevertheless, there's still appropriate conversion. And, you know, to become conversion, or is that almost a completely new building? So I have some concern about that.
And in looking at that, there's a lot of case law and what we've been looking at in terms of what can go through for approval, what can go through for conversion, and that's all being factored in when assessing the proposal. And we have to use the same principles, and that's what's been done here, so that the windows, the door walls, the roof can be changed.
Can I also ask about the fallback position? I was unable to open the P22 B11065N4B, unfortunately. So can you clarify what the situation is about this fallback position on the original application?
Yeah, so it relates to the same 6 buildings that are being considered here, and that's to convert them into 5 dwellings. And that prior approval was issued. And in carrying out the conversion to the 5 dwellings, they would have had use of access. They would have had or been provided with a waste scheme. The highways arrangement would have been approved. That is something that can be considered at prior approval stage. The highways officer looked at it and was satisfied that it could be provided for those 5 dwellings. So it's the actual conversion of the buildings is directly comparable with what's previously been approved. And this application is just looking at those elements which do amount to an improvement.
Okay, so there's not much difference, is there, between the original application?
So I think, well, it may not be necessary, but it might be. Is it possible to get the map back up on the screen, just in case? So for those of us who were on the site visit, I think it was very clear like what had been approved and what was new about this. But if anyone needs clarity, maybe we just get that map up and you can ask questions on that basis. But I'll go to Councillor Horton at the moment.
Two from right, Chair. Firstly, we've heard speakers from both sides talking about whether or not a lawful development plan may be required. I was just wondering if the officer could clarify for us on that point.
Yeah. So the prior approval process in its own right. Right, I think that's the slide.
Perfect, thank you.
That allows, if it's agreed, that allows the applicant to go away and carry that out tomorrow. Yes, there's a plan. There's no need for a follow-on process to confirm that.
Thank you. And then my second question, if I may, you was talking about a recommended amendment to condition 11. I was wondering if you could just clarify what the recommendation was for me. I don't know if I missed it or something else.
So under 11, it talks about providing car parking. Just get to car parking, turning points. I just wanted to include within that the 2 passing bays, so they were specifically implemented.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gascoigne.
Yeah, so to come back on Councillor Coleman's point about the highways. So I think in the report it says the highways officer doesn't object. So did they pick out this particular issue? Obviously you've got these passing places, but maybe they're not in, there isn't one close enough to the entrance to be helpful for the particular problem that Councillor Coleman highlighted.
The highways officer is very familiar with the site and the access and the previous proposal, so has a good understanding of what would be required for the site, and again request additional information which was provided as part of the application. The two passing bays were put in from or proposed from day one. So all of that combined, so he's happy that it's appropriate for 5 households and where there's a road of 20 miles an hour. So I don't think there's anything further to sort of unpick there, because they've explored it and are satisfied with the proposal.
That's Mercy.
Thanks, Chair. I just had a couple of quick questions. The first one, just to make it crystal clear, because it's been spoken about a little bit, is the validity of the original permission or the fallback permission. Just to, for the avoidance of being the slightest bit of doubt, it's not within the gift of this committee to change or rescind that permission, that's all.
That's correct. I don't think there's any need to investigate.
Second is about the point Councillor Coleman raised about the brown bins. Whether, I appreciate you might not be able to give an answer right off the top of your head, but would it be possible to collect brown bins as it stands, or would we need a condition to cover people opting into brown bins? Or
I have had a correspondence with the waste officer on that in the last couple of days, and they've confirmed that if the applicant was going down a private service, that would be all encompassing for all elements, because to ask for the brown bins, that would then require pickup from they wouldn't be able to come into the site to do that. So it's better to have it all or nothing, all council or
so they couldn't mix and match, as it were, and just have brown bins but not the other collections. It would be kind of an all or nothing. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Councillor Pickles.
The 3 areas that have been allocated to biodiversity offset, can you just walk me through the condition? Because is this conditions now been modified from what it was originally in the package?
No, the condition is the same, but having reviewed it, we're satisfied that the approach is consistent with other applications where we secured specific areas for biodiversity enhancement, with the submission of a management plan, maintenance plan, so that we know how it's going to be maintained for 30 years.
So but that's the reason why I was asking the question, because I think when Mr. Cresswell mentioned it, he said in perpetuity, whereas my understanding with the drafting I read was for 30 years.
That's the standard approach, and that's what our
college. It's just so they're not the same thing. I was just wondering.
The 30 years is actually the monitoring, which is consistent with the new legislation, whereas I think the use of the land is in perpetuity, which is particularly by the condition.
So one of my concerns is about the neighbourhood plan. I wondered if you could talk a bit about it, because I think neighbourhood plans are great and I always recommend to people. So I'm just interested about how much weight that's given in here, because from what some speakers were saying, this goes directly against the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, I can pick up on that. But the neighbourhood plan policies, I did give full consideration when I was assessing the application. I spent quite a long time looking at infill. If it was new dwellings, new proposal, if it was new buildings, yes, we would look at, does that constitute infill development? But because it's conversion, the buildings are already there, and infill doesn't even come into that.
Right.
You're purely looking at buildings that are already there, and can they are capable of conversion? So yes, they were factored, but because of the type of application and the nature of the proposal, it wasn't relevant to that assessment. But the design policies have been touched on.
Are there any further questions for Officer, or should we move into debate? Any further questions?
Sorry.
It's right, look,
I saw something in the report about access to the village. So obviously, whenever we're doing development, we want to encourage travel that isn't by car. So there's no sort of direct footpath. I think I read somewhere in the report. Could you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, I think it's relevant to the previous point we've picked up on. So if we were looking at brand new developments, would it be a sustainable location? And an element of that is how well connected it is. In this case, we're looking at existing buildings, and there's benefit in being able to reuse those buildings if they're capable of conversion, and that's the benefit in terms of sort of sustainability, rather than yes, ideally should be connected, but we're purely looking at conversion, which sort of sits outside of that process.
Okay, and one more thought, if I may, Councillor Thompson. So I saw that another thing that's been added is about the carport and the cycle storage. I don't know, this might be outside the remit of the planning permission, but do we know anything about the specification of the cycle storage? And the reason I ask is it happened somewhere in my ward where someone's bike was stolen from the storage, and then their insurance didn't cover it because it wasn't a certain specification.
A slightly odd scenario. When Highways first looked at this, they picked up on that some of the carports and some of the plans didn't have doors on. So that was quickly corrected. Whether that's just an error in how the plan's been put together. But we've got the elevations of all the carports and the cycle stores. So we're relatively happy that the secure buildings. So I don't think there's any concerns from that aspect.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Any final questions? In which case, I'm suggesting we move to debate. So, can I get a motion on this application? Would someone like to put a motion? Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and grant approval to the application. To give a couple of reasons, it would be in accordance with the officer's report. For me in particular, I think given that we've got this fallback permission in place already, that the new application includes improvements particularly to biodiversity. I think that if you boil it down to thinking about choice between two options or two applications, I think the second one is better. And from that point of view, I think that we should approve the one we've got in front of us.
And just to clarify, that would include the amended condition and the additional condition on waste as well. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Piggles.
It's going to be a condition around the removal of the gate posts and the gates.
I don't think that was. Sorry,
So I can pick up on that.
Yeah.
So we're already asking for the conditions for details of boundary treatment at the stage that's submitted. Subject approval, but that's the point that we clarify where the gate goes or is removed in time.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the officer's recommendation with the amended condition 11 and the additional condition on waste as set out. Sorry, let's go up to debate. Councillor
I don't like the proposal, basically. I mean, I hear what Catherine says about, they're not new dwellings, they're conversions, nevertheless, they're dwellings. And so for me, that goes against the neighbourhood plan. And I think, neighbourhood plans, we've got one in our village, and I'm very careful about it. And wording some of these things, you have to be checked very carefully. But nevertheless, for me, a dwelling is a dwelling. I don't like the design of them. I think they're far in advance for poultry and so on and so forth. They're not as human dwellings. I think it's residential creep into the rural hinterland of the village. And I think there's the problem of access as well, which I think we already discussed here. So, okay.
Understood. Any further points in debate? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very torn on this application. On the one hand, I recognise it is very clearly an improvement to the already approved category Q conversion. On the other hand, as Councillor Barrow says, I'm very torn with how this relates to particularly policy 1 of the village neighbourhood plan, and how it relates to whether this sort of thing does count as infill development. I notice even that the neighbourhood plan states that the built-up area is defined as existing non-agricultural buildings, which the proposed conversion obviously are current or former agricultural buildings anyway. So it to me is very uncertain. I'm really not sure how I feel on this one.
Any further points on that?
I would just say that the reason why I support the application, and that most of that I probably don't like it any more than anybody else, but there are no technical objections. So the grounds, and I would include the kind of opinion on whether this is a true conversion or not, exists. Therefore, it's very, very difficult. I think it's a very, very difficult application for us to say no to, given the scenario that's been painted by the officers.
Any further points? I mean, I think I'll just say that I think on balance, I'll be supporting this application. Again, I think we need to look at it as a betterment of something that exists already. There's already there's a pre-existing permission. It's not in our gift to remove that pre-existing permission. This secures greater levels of biodiversity. It secures greater levels of cycling provision, I think. And I'm very pleased that the concern over waste has been largely addressed, because I think, attending the site, the idea of there being sort of 10 or 15 sacks up the front was I would say it would have been unneighbourly. So I'm very pleased that that has been resolved in this. And of course, if we do not approve this, then none of that is required. So I will be supporting this application this evening. Anything further? Councillor Gascoigne.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be supporting this as well, for a lot of the reasons that's been said. But I think the thing that really clinched it for me was the difference between if they were brand new dwellings and the fact that they are conversion. From what Catherine has been saying, all the answers you've given me to my questions, and although to Councillor Barrow's point, we might feel like they are different things, if in planning terms that's what it is, then those are the rules. So from my point of view, I'm going to be approval.
Any further points? In which case, I'm suggesting we take a vote on this application. So all those in favour of the motion to approve with those amended and extend further conditions. Those against? Any abstentions? That passes. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to the next item. I'll give people a second to leave the room. The second item on the agenda this evening is the land east of Oxford Close. Oxford Close comes to Magnews, and Catherine, we're presenting on this one as well. Yeah, I quickly go grab one. Yes, please. Yes, we'll take a 30-second break to grab some news.
people to use the green in a responsible way. So the scouts would be able to do outdoor activities literally just across the road. So it makes it a very convenient location. I want to finish on a plea. Kingston Bagpues has grown substantially in recent years and will continue to grow with a further 600 houses earmarked at the eastern end of the village. Young people have not benefited at all from this growth, and there's a lack of facilities for those that do not want to play sports in the village. We need somewhere for young people to meet and to take part in activities which are fun, challenging, and help them become responsible members of the community and society. By agreeing to this planning proposal, you're going to give them that chance. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Clark. I'll just see if there are any questions or clarification for you. Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for speaking, Mr. Clark. I would just like to ask about the issue of the parking, as I think that's really the most important issue that we're going to discuss tonight. Was just hoping you could speak a little bit more about the ways that you think the group could mitigate the issue of the parking or encourage reduced car trips, for example.
So the way we've done it at the moment is we've asked all parents when they join the group to work with their children, to bring their children when they drop them off and when they pick them up, to walk or to scooter or to cycle. And so that's been a condition of them joining. Now we can't enforce it. You know, we're not going to expel them if they don't. But we're encouraging. We continually do it, and also we make it more difficult for them to bring their car. So when there's movements going on, they can't bring the cars into the car park. So we do have an existing car park, but it's only about the same size as the one here now. Our view is if we provide more spaces, they will drive, because they'll say, well, it's easy to drive and it's easy to park. So we deliberately do not want to provide them with parking spaces. And one other point I'd just like to mention is my understanding is highways designate a maximum of 16 spaces for a building this size. There is no minimum. They're making that number up. There is no minimum requirement for parking spaces on a building this size. It's a maximum, not a minimum.
Thank you. Are there any further? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Clark, I was just wondering if you could just clarify something for me, because I think it's got a little bit lost in the Excel sheet that's generated. What sort of numbers of young people do you usually have at a typical Scout evening at the current venue?
So the maximum we'd have is just under 30 children if it was a Cubs night. With two halls here, we might have more, but you wouldn't normally have two that size. You'd maybe have a group of 30 and maybe a group of 10 if they're maybe explorers or something. So you're not talking about that many people. And the older the children are, there's no way they're going to let their parents pick them up and drop them off.
Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. So Councillor Pickles.
So I think it's clear that the uni uses the facility for more than just the Scouts and the Beavers, and so it'll be open to all young persons groups within the constraints of the village of Kingston, Bagpues, and I guess Southmore as well. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, it is. But currently there now is only a Scout group. The Guys has folded, the Brownleys has folded, the Youth Club has folded. They folded for two reasons: lack of adult supervision and lack of suitable meeting spaces. If we can address the meeting spaces, then I think sooner or later we'll be able to find the adults that will run the groups for the other young people. But it is only for young people. We've got a perfectly suitable village hall for older children, adults.
Right. So there's no barriers to other people using it as long as they're a younger age group.
No, I mean, we want to encourage it, but what we don't want to do is replace any existing facilities. So there's a nursery in the village. That's fine. That can run. This is not for a nursery. This is for young people, groups that are meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I can't see any more questions. Also, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mr. Clark. And if you can, I'll ask you to turn off your camera again. And we now have a statement from Councillor Rayner. Emily Barry, would you mind reading that out?
Thank you, Chair. So a brief statement from myself as ward councillor in support of the application for a young person centre to support local Scout groups and young people. This site allocation and Section 106 agreement from the development that took place in Kingston Park is an addition to the village that is long overdue. The initial application in 2021 and the proposed back from 2015 confirms this, but until the application is granted, neither grant money can be applied nor fundraising strategies put into place to secure and raise the necessary funds. And even though the village has doubled in size, the infrastructure and facilities for youth have been unable to. In fact, rather than being more groups operating, the lack of appropriate space has meant that groups have had to cease operation. The conditions recommended from the countryside officer regarding a mitigation strategy for great crested newts is of course welcomed, and although highways show their concerns, their comments do not reflect the determination of the group and commitment to substantially limit the use of cars and consequently encourage walking and cycling. This may even become worthy of a badge. If my colleagues are finally minded to approve this application, even with conditions, then this would indeed make a significant difference to the lives of the young within our village.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Rayner. I now ask if there are any questions for our officer. Councillor Madison.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a brief question to clarify the number of car parking spaces. We heard from Mr. Clark there about the minimum number. So can you clarify what position is on that exactly?
Yeah, so when Highways asked for the 16 spaces, that's based on the floor space and the fact that it would be used as a sort of community venue. It's correct that there's no minimum spaces. In their assessment, they take account of other potential risks, whether there's scope to park on the highway, whether that would cause a high-risk risk. So that's they have factored in that it's a no-through road, and that's where their concerns come from. But I think it's also worth factoring in the ethos of the Scout group, and that they are pushing for a sustainable approach. And on balance, we feel that the 8 parking spaces, that's a suitable balance between the risk and the requirement.
I'd like to clarify from Highways. I mean, I think it's very much but just to clarify, the concern Highways had is like parking on the through road and not being enough spaces, rather than any issues to do with like safety and sort of safety of other people.
That's correct. I think their concern is if there were a large number of cars and they were all parking on the no-through road, then there'd be a requirement for them to turn either in junctions or in driveways and then sort of come back facing other traffic. So with the small number of parking spaces, it allows them to go into the site, turn around and come out safely. And we've reduced it down to the sort of the smallest number that's possible that still meets that need, so that somebody actually had to drive to the site for whatever reason, and they've still got the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Horton.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions on the conditions recommended in the report, if I may. So condition, the first one is something that Councillor Piggles made me realise. Condition 14 is saying it's solely for the benefit of the young people's groups based in Kingston Bagpies. It reminded me that Southmore is technically a separate village. And what I want to be certain is that we're not precluding by condition, say, a group that bounces from site to site within that area.
That's a fair point. I did give some thought to it. It's worded as based in Kingston Bagpies.
Yeah, which I understand would not allow a one-off visiting group. That's fair enough. But I was more concerned if there is an organisation that was bouncing around a couple of the halls, but still essentially within the larger village of Kingston Bagpies and Southmore, if you see what I mean.
It could be amended to Kingston Bagpies and Southmore if that was a more appropriate local connection.
Well, I would, because I think the 2 things are merged together so much.
I mean, I also know that the Scout group is first Longworth, which is.
We'll take some more questions that might come up in debate. Councillor Barrow.
It's nothing to do with parking, basically, but am I correct in thinking that in relation to security, there's a perimeter fence, but it's 1 metre high? Is that right? I misread that.
Yes, so I think that is correct. As one of the conditions we've asked for secure by design, so they would have to go through that certificate to make sure. I mean, that looks at sort of improvements to the building, locks and security and various other things. So that has been considered.
I mean, I'm just wondering whether, I know there was a concern about security at the site, whether it should be high, like 2 metres.
It could be, but you also then have concerns over sort of natural surveillance and being able to see into the sites, and they sort of work hand in hand. If you start to put the walls up, then it then creates dark corners which can attract.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of a solid wall, obviously, but a slab fence with visibility. Just the concern I have is just that, if there's a concern about site security, you'd really want a higher fence.
I'm satisfied that would be picked up, or the measures that are necessary would be picked up and secured by design.
Okay.
Councillor Hawson, sorry, I think I cut you off. You were saying.
No, it's all right. My other one's on condition 13. I was just curious how you arrived at the number for at least 18 bicycles. So I'm just curious where the number has come from.
And that was prompted directly from highways.
Okay, and that's purely a minimum, so they could put in 40 if they wanted to.
Yeah.
That's
Sounds like they'll need them.
Well, that was more of my concern. I was wondering whether 18 was enough, but
Is that cycle storage covered?
That's what we tend
It
to
says
ask
that,
for.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that was just my actual question is about biodiversity net gain. So could you just talk us through what is happening with biodiversity net gain?
Yeah.
Both of these applications we've seen tonight were submitted before the requirement for the 10% uplift. The first application relevant to this, but they decided to go above, even though they didn't have to. So what's the situation with this one?
So this one's policy requirement of no net loss to meet the policy requirements. The advice from our quality officer is that that can be done through biodiversity enhancement plan. We know there were newts nearby, and the wider sites had fencing to manage that. Since that's been taken down, there's a couple of years have passed, and we're back looking at the newts, the potential they could have gone to the site. So we've secured a condition to ask for those measures to be put back before any work starts on sites. So for this particular one, it's tied directly to the biodiversity enhancement plan from what measures they put on site, and we would look at that at condition stage.
Okay, because I think I saw in the report about some trees that had maybe been taken down because some people were concerned about heights and stuff. So why were some trees taken? That's just separate to this.
Yeah, there's no protection on the trees, so there's no real requirements that could have been done if there was an application there or not.
Yes.
But for this particular one, the biodiversity calculation, it isn't a particular concern, and any enhancement will be secured by condition.
Any further, Councillor Vale?
Just to come back to the security thing, can we ask that during the design phase that they do look at security in the height of the fence rather than just assume it's going to be looked at?
I'm fairly satisfied that would be done through the secured by design process. It's a technical. It sits outside the council. It's a technical process that they'd have to meet a good list of requirements. It's looked at specifically to this scheme, and I'm satisfied with it being a professional process that they're best placed to review that, rather than we've secured it in the planning process by condition, and I think that's sufficient.
Okay, any further questions, or Camille, Councillor Shaw?
I was just going to ask him, who does the secure by design accreditation?
It's a recognised organisation that does it. On other applications, we've had the Thames Valley police officer recommend that applicants go through that process.
No, that's what I was wondering.
I think they'll run it from my recollection.
Yeah.
So I think possibly we're ready to move to the vote. So almost before a motion on this application. Councillor Hawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to recommend that we approve this application. I would also like to make a slight tweak to the wording on condition 14, just to make it a little bit more vague, so it's not specifically Kingston Bikeways. I don't know exactly how I want to do it yet, but just to make it sort of the surrounding area as well as Kingston.
So we will come out of debate.
Yes.
So we can make suggestions during debate. Well, let's. This is someone to second that application, Councillor Pickles. Right. So, is there any debate on this, including how we might reword? Should we mind to approve that condition? That's Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any contributions at the moment to the question of the condition for the surrounding area, but I did just want to jump in and basically voice my support for the motion to accept the application. It is allocated already as a site for community use in the local plan part 1. And I'm satisfied that the issues around the parking will be mitigated to the greatest extent that they can be by the Scout group encouraging active travel, walking, cycling, etc., which is very much in line with what I would call the scouting ethos anyway. I had a brief personal remark to make about this one, which is I was in the Beavers, Cubs and Scouts. My dad was a Scout leader, and after leaving the Scouts, I continued basically to act like an assistant to him for a while, going back and helping out with the group. It was of immense benefit to me, and as well to many other young people, including my 2 sisters, who were unable to join a guides group because I don't think there was one. So they joined the Scouts group, and we expanded it to include some other girls as well to come into the group because there wasn't an equivalent guides group girls of their age. We got up to all kinds of fantastic stuff: rock wall climbing, rafting, kayaking, sailing. We went up in helicopters, planes, or all kinds of stuff that we just would not have had the opportunity to do otherwise. In addition to reinforcing, I think, a very good attitude of self-betterment and general consciousness of a social good. That's my brief little personal remark on that one, which I just wanted to make because I've had such a great experience with the Scouts myself, and I would enthusiastically be supporting the application to approve this because of that.
Very good. Councillor Barrett. Well, just to say that I think they desperately need new accommodation. That whole other thing's awful.
Okay, so just on the question of how we're going to potentially rework condition 14, I guess the options would be, well, we might take advice from our officer on the options. I was going to suggest to say Kings of Badcrews and Southmore, but would that be sufficient, or do we think that's not specific enough?
Well, I guess my question was whether it was better to specifically name which villages are acceptable, or whether it's better to say Kingston Badcrews and say something vague about the surrounding area. I'm unsure as to what is the better option.
I think my worry with that just is that if we go too expansive, we're then defeating the purpose of the walking out of travel. So I feel like Kingston Badcrews and Southmore would be fine, because if. But again, equally, I don't know if someone, I don't know. Maybe we could ask the officer what.
I think that's a reasonable approach because it then keeps it within the local area. But it certainly would exclude if somebody was an individual wanted to come from further afield. Yes. It just
I understand that.
People.
So, Councillor Gaston.
Yeah, they're just going to voice my opinion that I think that that's a sensible suggestion. Kingston and Southmore, they're virtually joined. Well, they have joined to me. I have been before. There are other villages that are nearby, but I think you would end up using the car even though they're closed, just because they're like separate settlements. So I think Kingston and Southmore makes the most sense.
It's the contiguous nature of Southmore and Kingston that make it sensible. Whereas other areas, there's definite kind of separation, like the A420, for example.
Indeed.
So I think I'm strong support that. But whether you can consult with the applicant just to make sure they're cool with that. Well, there might be the anti-Southmore League.
well, that's as it may be, but we've decided. So I think we could probably put in. So we just say we just add the words and Southmore.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Any further debate on this, or shall we go to the council?
Just to briefly say that I think it's so clear to me that I'm going to support this and that we should approve it because it's a great thing, just providing a facility for young people that's obviously needed. But everyone that spoke was in favour.
Any further points? In which case, I'm suggesting a vote on this application to accept this motion with a slight tweak to condition 14 to include and Southmore. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. So I believe that's our final item this evening. So with that, just leaves me to thank all our speakers this evening, all our officers, and indeed all of you councillors. So thank you very much. And with that, I close the meeting, and I just ask Bertie to confirm the live stream is up.